know each other here? Do we need to do just quick introductions? Is that all right? Just very, very quick. I know we're eating into our time. Just some very quick introductions. So obviously I'll start with me. Laura Tilley, parent carer rep for Family Voice. I'm also chair of Peterborough Area Down Syndrome Group, and yeah, mum, that's it. So Zoe.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Zoe Redfern Nichols. I'm a commissioning manager and I work across Peterborough City Council and Cambridge County Council. So the kind of main part of my work is commissioning services for children and young people with disabilities, kind of and/or send. But I'm working with Laura on this particular part of recommissioning. So if I hand over to Laura Fordham.
Thank you, Zoe. I'm Laura Fordham. I'm a commissioning officer for Peterborough and Cambridgeshire Local Authority. I predominantly work in the children and families team, but have picked up some new projects with children with SEND and disabilities, hence me being here today.
Thank you. Jason?
Hi, I'm Jason Nowell. I'm a parent rep for Family Voice Peterborough.
Dorota, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Dorota Trados. I'm a parent representative for Family Voice Peterborough.
Thank you.
And mum of 2 children with SEND.
Lovely, thank you. Marianne?
I'm Marianne Dealey. I'm the manager of the SEND Partnership Service, which is the impartial service that local authority has to deliver.
Thank you for coming today. I know you're always busy. Obviously, you all are, but Tanya? Oh, struggling to hear you. Tanya's one of our lovely parents who's joined us today. Katie?
Hi everybody, I think everybody probably knows me. Katie Barnett, I'm the complex case manager in the SAMS team, and it's my service and my team that generally represent the local authority at mediations and dispute resolutions. So if you're ever in one or if you've ever been in one, it would have been myself or my coordinator from the local authority.
Okay. Shaz?
Hi everyone, my name is Shazia Ahmed. I'm a parent representative from Family Voice. Oh my God, I forgot, that's so bad. Can I just say I'm fasting, okay? So I'm half asleep. And
so it's nice to meet you all. So the point of the meeting was to talk about mediation and resolution. So has anybody, where do you want to start? Shall I leave it with you, Laura? Have you got something you'd like to start us off with, or anything?
Is that our Laura?
Yes.
Sorry,
I have got my tea now. I will start. I'll give a brief overview for everyone just on the Mediation and Disagreement Resolution Service. So the service is for supporting children with SEND and parents who have disagreements with the local authority or health services, because the M&DR, which is Mediation and Disagreement Resolution Service, offers a quicker and less formal way of resolving disagreements relating to the EHCP process, and that can include a number of different, disagreements around refusal to assess or reassess for education healthcare plans, refusal to issue, the contents of the EHCP, and refusal to amend and ceasing of an EHCP. Whereas that, obviously, that's the mediation element of it, and the disagreement resolution part of it would be for all other SEND related issues, which include part I of an EHCP, which is predominantly to do with education settings and provision within those settings. So the Mediation and Disagreement Resolution Service works obviously very, very much so alongside the SEND Partnership Information Service and the SAMS team, who attend mediation and disagreement resolution meetings. Parents who would like those mediation and disagreement resolution services have to take sort of the information advice prior to those going forward, just to ensure that they're informed of what the best options are for them. and it is independently commissioned by the local authority for an external provider to provide that service, which is obviously confidential and unbiased in that sense. Obviously, any decisions made if parents are unsatisfied with the mediation and the outcome of that meeting, it allows them to appeal to tribunal, and certifications are provided after that mediation for that process to start. So yeah, there you go. If anyone would like to add anything, please feel free.
Marion, I didn't know if you, Marion or Katie, I didn't know if you wanted to add anything from your perspectives.
So I think from my perspective, as you probably all know, we're currently in the process of recommissioning the provider that offers for the local authority at the minute. So we rejig in the service spec and the contracts, and we just want to make sure that the service going forward is appropriate to meet the needs and the wants of the local community, because ultimately it's there for parents or young people if they're over 16. So we want to make sure that the service that we're offering is what's wanted, what's needed, and is working. I think in Peterborough we've got a hugely successful mediation service. It's extremely rare that after any type of mediation service a disagreement goes on to tribunal. So our statistics in that area are very good, and that's something that we absolutely want to keep up. They give us a very open forum to talk to parents directly, to talk to young people directly, to hear from schools, to hear from other professionals. And sometimes that can be a missing link when you're making decisions that are quite paperwork based, certainly for refusals to assess in the first instance. I think so it would be helpful to know if which of the parents that we've got here have used the service, what their thoughts are.
Just on what you both, I would totally agree. Just on what both Laura and Katie have said, just to reiterate that therefore everything that we talk about today, all the discussions today, is really helpful, because when we're shaping that specification, which we then put out to kind of the market, and then providers look and see whether they think they can deliver the service, it's helpful to, we can put the bones there in terms of legally what it has to deliver, but it's really important that that's fed into by, as we've said, the people that actually use the service. So everything that we've said today will help to inform what that specification looks like. We'll probably also send it round when we've got a draft version. So if there's any comments that anybody wants to make, please absolutely feel free to do so. We've also a couple of weeks ago put out a questionnaire, similarly, to kind of get people's views, that again feeds into what the specification looks like, what we'll actually ask providers, what we'll say is really important to us as a local authority, and as an area. I think we're looking to put that out again, so we'll let you all know about that as well. But yeah, Laura, that's where we wanted to start, really, wasn't it, in terms of who's had experience of the service?
Yeah.
So far.
I've had experience with the service a little while ago now, but I didn't find, I went to mediation for my son Romeo, who has autism, and I found it not very supportive, I'll be honest with you, and I think a lot of it was made up, like making that whole, we do this support, we offer him this support, that support in school, and to be honest, he still struggles now and he's left with no support. So it puts me off going to mediation again for any of my other children that have got SEND needs, like for instance Precious, who's got ADHD and autism. I spoke to the kids mediation service this morning, and I'm not willing to go to mediation again because I feel I was pushed into a corner and made to sign documents that just to basically say, oh yeah, they were going to support his needs, and it never happened.
So it sounds,
and now he's at mainstream secondary school, no support, and it really frustrates me, the fact that he can't tie his shoelaces when he's nearly 13 years old, and he just can't care for himself, and he's got a lot of extra self-care needs and this, and he hasn't got any SEND support at all in place. As much as they have it on paper, I don't think it really happens. My daughter, who's got the ADHD and autism, even the counsellor said he's appalled that there's no support in school for her, and that she hasn't even got anyone like to speak to, or if she's got any issues and things like this, there's no one available, you know. It's all I've got to contact them, and then there's no one available. It's just, you know, hard work, to be honest. And they're constantly excluding her, constantly giving her detention, and you know, it doesn't do the children's self-esteem or confidence and mental health any good, I believe. But yeah, so that's the experience I've had, you know. Sorry to say, but it is the truth.
No, that's really helpful. Katie, were you gonna?
Yeah, I think the difficulty is what I'm hearing, Tan, is that you're having some real difficulties with school, and I think that's where it's perhaps important to make sure that the service that we provide for mediation clearly explains the purpose and the extent, because a mediation on a refusal to assess isn't there to resolve your issues with school outside of the statutory process necessarily. So there are limits to what we can achieve. Certainly in a mediation, I mean, if we were looking at a DR to support with difficulties, it would be different. But it can't be an answer to all problems. We are just looking at facilitating that statutory process. And I think what I'm hearing is difficulties with school. That's not something that mediation, it is the function to solve, if that makes sense.
No, but can I just mention, they don't tell you before you go into mediation that they're going to have many different professionals in the meeting, and then you're in there on your own, and you feel like you push, you know, like there's 10 of them against you sort of thing. And I think maybe they should inform the parent that they should bring support with them, so they don't feel isolated and on their own with things when they're having to discuss all the challenges or all the things that's, you know, happening within what's going on. But you know, I just think it's sometimes difficult. I think it's better to try and talk about things and try and get to the bottom of things before it gets to this sort of, you know, level. And I think with SEND support, for instance, they're meant to have meetings every 6 months. We never ever had a meeting for years in any of the schools. This is the problem. You know, a lot of them are taken over by academies and that now, and they've got no concern, you know, that's the problem. And then you've got to complain all through their process, and then it's got to go through the local authority. Parents haven't got the time to do this when they've got multiple children with SEND needs. But on a positive note, don't get me wrong, parent partnership, the mediators, and that I've never ever had a problem with. Haven't had a problem with them. Even the local authority man that come, I think his name was the same as the Senko at the time.
Oh, was it Bob?
David Jones, I think his name was.
Oh, okay,
David Jones. But he was fantastic. He was like, if you took this to tribunal, you probably have a good case because your son has got autism and things like this. But I felt like I was pushed into a corner just to agree with the school, or I would be the one that was looking the bad one, you know. So I just agreed with them, and then I thought, why did I do that? And I felt really frustrated with myself because I knew my son needed that extra support. But yeah.
Thank you. Did I see Shaz? Did you have your hand up as well? Yes,
yeah,
you did.
I just a quick question. So in terms of the actual meetings, are parents allowed to bring a representative? So for example, other than Marion or someone from her team, so for example, a colleague or a friend to sit in the meetings?
Anybody they want, and they often do. It's quite normal for parents to be there with a sister, a grandmother. You can also bring a solicitor or an advocate if you've got one involved or supporting. So yeah, so mediation is there for you to bring the parents' choice, whoever you want.
Okay. And are they actively allowed to contribute to the meeting, or is it sort of more sort of not sit there quietly, but you know, a supportive role rather than being more proactive?
Absolutely. Say whatever you want, whenever you want. I think that certainly the way at the minute everything's virtual. Obviously, everything's been virtual since the start of COVID, which has its pluses and its minuses. But what it does is to me, and I don't know if everybody would agree, but it gives you that sense of comfort. Parents, if they need to just turn their video off for a minute, if they need to just step away for a minute, it's different to having the pressure of being in a room. but we try to facilitate completely open conversation. So a mediator will try to direct the conversation in so much as appropriate at the time, but the aim is always to have open conversation from everybody that can input. So certainly in none of the mediations that I've ever done, and I do less these days because my coordinator's taken over, but we would never say you can't talk or you can't talk. It's a very open forum.
I know from our current mediation provider, from their perspective, that's one of the things they monitor is how many people are in the meeting, not from a perspective of like, you know, mum, dad can't bring someone with them, but from the perspective of they don't want it to be kind of either local authority kind of heavy or lots and lots of people from school. So I know that when we do our monitoring meetings, they generally like to be about 5 people, because then you can, you know, you've got that time to facilitate a discussion, everyone to feel like they're inputting, but it doesn't feel kind of unbalanced in any way. So it's definitely something that we look at as well.
Okay, brilliant, thank you.
Have you been through the mediation process before, Shaz?
No, I haven't. I was just curious in what goes on. I mean, I have had previous issues with my son's older school, but it was more, we didn't get to that stage, so it was sort of handled within the school and myself. So yeah.
Yeah.
Director, have you got a question? Director, did you have your hand up? Oh, Director.
Yeah.
Yes.
So from my side is yes. Yeah. 1 second. Yes. Okay. So I have a question because I represent also home educators. Is that working for home educators who have any disagreements with home education officers in the from the local authorities, and is that working for us as well?
Not for that type of disagreement. So the mediation process is a statutory process that relates to disputes about education, health and care plans. So if there was somebody who is home educating that had an issue with the contents of their education, health and care plan, because of course you can home educate and have an EHCP, then yes, absolutely. But it's not there to facilitate discussions with other services, if that makes sense.
Yes, that makes sense, because you know that some home educators officers may think that they have the guidance, they don't understand issues which we may have with our children at home as well. Sometimes people need to apply for HCH plan for them, and then there is a problem because the pediatricians asking for any evidence from the school, but the children are home educated, and it's quite difficult for us to. It would be very useful for us to have any mediator service as well.
What disagreements would you use it for? So what would the disagreement be, or the difficulty?
For example, when the parents going to the pediatrician, to the GP and ask for referral, for referral to the services, and the GP is asking for any evidence from the school, but there's no evidence because the child is home educated, and they are not listening to the parents straight away. And there is disagreement between, for example, GP and the parent, because they need evidence, and the parent statement is not enough.
So the GP is not necessarily recognising your kind of statement as a parent who's also the educator.
Yeah, for example.
Okay.
That's really difficult, because I think if we're looking for diagnostic pathways for sort of neurodevelopmental conditions, the DSM, the diagnostic criteria, requires evidence across 2 settings. So it's not that they require evidence from a school, but it's that the difficulties have to be experienced in more than one environment. So I can completely see how that would be really challenging. And I don't know what the answer is to be honest, because the diagnostic criteria is set out by sort of NHS England, and there has to be that consistency. But I do think even if you're home educated, I'm sure you can access the early help pathway, and in which case perhaps asking for an assessment via that route is better. Zoe, am I right?
I don't see why not.
I don't see why not.
I don't see
really,
why
really
not.
hard. It's really hard, and it's a difficulty, and they know that there's a gap in the service there because they have to have a lead professional, and there isn't a lead professional because they're not in a setting.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
And early help know about it, and we've raised it as an issue because we won't be lead professionals. We can't be because we're impartial. And but if the parent wants to carry that through, we're quite happy to help them challenge the early help people, because technically they would have to provide a service somewhere along the line.
Yeah.
Can early help not be that lead professional in that scenario?
Well, and that's where we would go with it, yes, but it is an issue and it has to be challenged. But it is a difficulty. Unfortunately, when parents choose to home educate, they step outside of the school's education system, which actually unfortunately steps them outside of other systems as well, which are schools led. So the diagnostic pathway is very much school or setting heavy, and so by stepping outside of that and agreeing to home educate your child, you're stepping outside of that remit there, which is really difficult.
Then how would you address that gap? That's my concern. There's a clear...
Well, it's an issue that we raise, and Family Voice could take that forward and raise as well with the early help teams, because it is a difficulty there, but unfortunately that would also need to be raised with health about their diagnostic pathway, because and again it tracks back to what Katie was saying about them using their diagnostic criteria, their legal criteria for a diagnosis says that things have to be across more than one setting, and that's really, really difficult when you've not got your child in an education setting, and your home and your education setting is one.
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand that, Marion. I'm struggling to get my head around it. So I don't want to use the word discrimination, but I just feel like there is that big gap there, unfortunately. So what I feel like then those parents and then those children are missing out in a way. They're getting everything delayed because of their choices, which I find quite unfair, really, to be honest. So but
it is something that Family Voice as a parent carer forum could raise with the health people.
That'd be helpful.
We can escalate with Louise and
go through to Siobhan.
Yes. Right. Okay.
And speak about that as a higher level.
Yeah. Right, thanks, Marion.
Can I ask a quick question? I haven't gone through resolution or this type of thing before. I have spoken to Marion, but that was when we were going through EHC process years ago, so I know she's also busy. What is the actual process? How would we get to be speaking to you guys? What would we have already had to have been through as parents? Would we, there must be a process. I just wondered if you could just talk that through for us.
So there's always a decision that kicks the process off. So like Laura said at the start, it can either be a decision not to conduct a needs assessment in the first place, not to issue a plan, a decision about the contents of the plan, a decision to cease about the plan. So in essence, the local authority makes a decision. It can be a number of decisions. It can also include school placement. With every decision from the local authority, you get a decision letter. So that decision letter gives you your right to mediate and your right to appeal. All of our decision letters come with information about mediation and appeals, and they also come with a trifold leaflet, which gives you information about our current mediation provider. So if you've got a decision that you're not happy with, you've got the information on how to contact the mediation provider, and the first step is to pick up the phone and have a conversation with them. So in the first instance, I think you generally ring their hotline. They'll book you a time slot for an advice and information service and phone call. That's always the first step. They call it a MyAsk, where you'll get all of the information about what could happen at mediation, whether or not it's something that you should do, whether or not there are other options. And I think the vast majority of parents who go that far and have that first phone call do go on to mediation, which is really positive, because it gives you that forum to share your concerns. So if at that MyAsk step you say, right, I want a mediation, the mediators have got pre-arranged dates with the local authority, so they'll go through the dates with you. You'll choose one that works for you. You can let the mediation provider know if you want the school there, if there's anybody in particular that's health professional wise that you want there. The mediation provider will then confirm the date and time with us. We'll say if there's anybody we think would be really helpful, if there's an advisory teacher involved, if there's an EP that's recently seen the child that can give some perspective. Equally, we'll say, oh, let's invite them, see what the parents think. Do they think it would be useful or not? Ultimately, if there's somebody the parent doesn't want there, we would never enforce that upon them. So if I was to say, oh, I think it would be really helpful to have such and such here, and the parent said, oh, actually, I'm really uncomfortable with such and such, they just wouldn't attend. That's never a problem. A mediator will be allocated from there. They'll have a conversation with the parent before the meeting. They'll have a conversation with us generally before the meeting, just so they're clear on what the issues are, so that they can best direct the time in the meeting. And then you get your meeting date. Does that make sense?
Perfect, thank you. So do you have, so you said that most of the people that get to mediation, most people get to that point, then go on to mediation. Is there, you know, is there a success rate, or, you know, how do you tend to, I guess each case is individual and you're never going to say it's going to be 100% one way or 100% another way. But I'm guessing you're always looking for a win-win for everybody.
So absolutely. What we try to do, and I think what we're particularly good at, is even if we're still saying no in terms of the decision, we try to find other positives. So other things that can be done to support the child, other things that need to be done to support the family, other avenues, other options. And that's the main reason, really, she says, touch wood, that generally parents don't go on to tribunal, is because even if they haven't got the decision they wanted, they understand why. And they feel informed, they feel secure, they're confident actually that the decision is the right one, and that there are other things that can be done to support. In terms of outcomes, it is really difficult to map and to give percentages. The majority of mediation cases are refusals to assess. That's something that is a nationwide picture. Actually, in terms of tribunals nationally, about 45% of refusals to assess. Ours in Peterborough are more like 10%. We have a very low amount of refusal to assess tribunals, probably because of how well our mediation service works. Most refusals to assess that go to mediation are overturned. But what we tend to find, the reason for that is that schools will bring out evidence that wasn't submitted in the first place. So it's often that having a conversation gives a perspective that wasn't there. In terms of mediations where there's no additional information or not a new perspective, it's very, very rare that the decision changes, because the decision making on the information that we've got is very good in Peterborough. Our panel is very effective, but it does tend to be that either the school will bring some new information, or we're able to have a health colleague, a speech and language therapist, to set something out that was missing, just to close that piece of the puzzle, and equally with social care colleagues. So there can be a range of people involved. We do also have different times of the year. We have different types of mediations, or disagreement resolution meetings. I think after we've had a transition deadline, like our February or March, transition deadlines for primary, secondary, and secondary to further education transitions, we might have more Section I disagreements. Section I disputes, I would say, are more often than not upheld. But again, that gives perspective and understanding that perhaps people didn't have before as to why the decision was made. In terms of Section I disputes, it's also very rare that after a disagreement resolution meeting, a tribunal is lodged. And I can't think, Marion might tell me I'm wrong here, but I can't think off the top of my head of any that have been to mediation and then been successful for the request at mediation at tribunal.
Touch wood.
Touch wood. But that's good, because it says that we've got good decision making.
I think that's why it's really important that we work together. Like when we, like as commissioners, we always have meetings with our providers. We usually have them like quarterly throughout the year. And we've got a scenario in Peterborough where, you know, Marion, you know, attends, and we've got Katie that attends. So we've got commissioning there, and the kind of SEND partnership service perspective, and kind of the SAMS perspective. Obviously, Katie's really familiar with some of the most complex cases, and that allows us to, you know, when we talk about what's the success rate now, that allows us to look at the kind of, you know, the trends and the themes and the processes, because it's not necessarily that, it's about whether someone feels like there's a resolution at the end. Whether or not that means that the specific decision has been overturned isn't always the same thing. As Katie said, it might be that decision remains the same, but actually if after that session, you know, parents go away feeling like, oh, but I feel much more satisfied, I feel like I really can understand now what support is going to be put in place, and I feel comfortable with that, that's a resolution in itself. So it's harder to gauge than a percentage, but yeah, I mean, from a straight percentage in terms of tribunals, we have a much lower rate than most, if not most other local authorities, in terms of how many of our mediations then go on to tribunal. And I think that's the promotion of the service as well. We have, you know, our SAMS team will explain and will make reference to mediation, so parents have a understanding of what it is. I think if it's not promoted and it's not talked about, you know, at school with the local authority, you know, by the SEND partnership service, parents aren't gonna understand what its purpose is, and they might think, oh well, we need to go to court to remedy this, you know, go to tribunal to remedy, where that's not necessarily the case. It's often easier to remedy something in that kind of mediation environment.
I was just saying that we're hearing the same things, that you know, generally people are responding well to the mediation. And I was just thinking then about when we first filled out our EHC forms for my daughter. It seemed like an awfully scary process, and a very tense, it in itself is a very tense and difficult time. The fact that people are not sending through enough information is always a worry, but I believe the EHCP forms have changed slightly to encourage people to add more information. Is there anything we can do as parents to put a slightly more
almost,
make it more friendly, almost less fearful? It's almost a case of what can we do to encourage people to put as much information on there as possible, because I know when we were filling it out, we had to fill it out in a worst case scenario, and it felt like a really awful document, which then meant as soon as you turned it down or gave us any sort of feedback, I'm on it, I'm going to start fighting straight away, when conversations could be had very early on to prevent your need to go to mediation. Is that something you're looking at?
So there's a lot of things that we've done and are still doing in Peterborough to target those issues and those areas. So you're right, we rejigged the application form that was launched, Christ, I think it was back in September. That feels like forever ago, but I think it was back in September. We've also got a relatively new post in the local authority. So we've got an officer that purely deals with the 0 to 6 week part of the EHC assessment process. And her role is to make sure that the information is there. So she will phone settings and say, you haven't got a timetable of support. Where's your assess plan due review? You haven't got this, you haven't got that. I need it. It's not foolproof. Sometimes that information just doesn't come through, even if you ask for it. And equally, sometimes the information that you do get through is not detailed enough, doesn't have the level of information that you need. It's more of a tick box thing. And what we do is track that information. So the officer that's actually that 0 to 6 week officer also works within my bit of the service. So between us, we track which schools have missing information, which schools' information we think is less appropriate or less detailed or not good enough. That's fed then back into the local area SENI support part of our service to target training at SENCOs. So we do have functionality to feed that back. That is in place. That's a lot more than we've ever had before. I think we are seeing some successes. The difficulty is that it's a constant ongoing process. So you always get new SENCOs, you always get new head teachers, you always get different children, you always get new health professionals. So just as you've cracked something, the entire board will change and you've got to start from scratch. So it's not something that you can put in place to be perfect forever, but it is something that we constantly work on. And we do get, you can really see the difference. Actually, mediation it's not meant for this purpose, but it can be a really good training opportunity for schools as well. So it's always nice to see that when I've done a mediation with a school, you get a really good conversation with the SENCO, you get a good conversation with the parent. You can guide them as to what needs to be done, what needs to be in there, how they show that to you. Because often what you see is that schools are doing what they need to do, but they just don't know how to show that they're doing it. And that's what they've got to get better at, is that reporting, that graduated approach, those cycles. Because unfortunately, when we're making decisions, certainly about assessments, we've not met the child, we can't see the child, we get maybe 30 requests a month, we can't go and see those children, and we're so reliant on that professional reporting. So that's key. And I think what I see quite nicely is that feedback through from a SENCO that's perhaps put a really rubbish request in. We go to mediation, we have a chat, they get some targeted training from the team, and then over time you see the evolution to really robust assessments that are easy to judge on, and everything's there. And that's what we're looking for, is progress and progression. So it is something the team works on, something that's probably never going to be perfect, but it is something that we're very aware of and actively try to make better.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it is helpful, sorry Katie, with the running training programs for SENCOs, head teachers and wider professionals as well. And there's also the parent sessions as well. So I think that's been really helpful. I mean, I've been on quite a few of them actually. They are actually really good, they're really focused and they're really go through the process. So I think that's been really helpful as well. It's still unfortunate that some schools unfortunately do still get it wrong, or but again, that's just reinforcing actually this is what needs to go in and stuff. So I think it's work in progress, and like you said, it's not always going to be perfect every time, but I think there are systems in place, there is a lot of support in place now as well, not just for professionals but for the parents as well. Yeah, it's just about working together.
It is about working together, and like you say, it's never going to be perfect, but we've got really good support packages in addition actually to the sort of standard training. We do a new SENCO training package, which is more intense with a smaller number of SENCOs. So every year you identify the new SENCOs in your area and they have targeted support from the local authority, and that really helps. But of course, you have that period of training time, you have that period to bed in. I think with the changes in terms of the education white paper and the SEN green paper, I think there's some really helpful points that are coming through. Something that we haven't touched on yet today is that currently mediation is not compulsory before you can lodge an appeal, which is evidence of the fact that our appeal numbers are somewhere about 20 a year. One of those might have been to mediation, but the other 19 haven't. So we've missed out on the opportunity to resolve that other 19 before they've gone to tribunal, and it's been a 6-month process that's very difficult for everybody involved. So one of the recommendations in the green paper is that mediations will be mandatory, the meeting will be mandatory, whereas currently for all disputes except section I, all you've got to do is have that initial phone call. So if you have that initial phone call, you've had that MyAsk session, you thought, so this, I'm off to appeal, that's fine, off to appeal, you can go. But it's likely that with the reforms, you will have to actually go to mediation before you can lodge an appeal. And I think that's a good thing. I think people have probably got different opinions, but we'll watch this space for the impact that has.
Can I just ask, I realise I fell out of the meeting there, my network connection just went entirely, but I just wanted to ask quite a basic question. I know we've covered who's who's accessed mediation before, but did most of you know about it, particularly if you've, you know, if your child is at school receiving SEN support and you've considered, you know, you've looked at an EHCP or your child might have an EHCP, were most of you aware that there was such a thing as a mediation service?
Yeah, because the information comes with the draft and stuff as well. It comes with in the post with the actual document. So I think that's really helpful. And for me personally, like I said, when I had issues at my previous school, I did have some communication with Marion, which was really helpful. So again, it depends on how well you can navigate the system, how well people actually tell you about what services are out there. I mean, you can still have it in black and white, but unfortunately, some people, parents, because they're in that vulnerable situation, they're very stressed, they may miss out. So it's not just about putting a leaflet into the AHCP documents. I think there needs to be some sort of promotion. I'm not sure how different we can do that as well. And yeah, I think people who are more confident and more comfortable will access these services, but you will still get those cohort of patients. Oh my God, I'm going back to my own role. Parents and carers, sorry, who will miss out and, you know, will unfortunately won't be aware of what's going on. So that's something, you know, I'd be happy to pick up in terms of Family Voice and stuff, and hopefully Laura as well, and we can then have a conversation with how we can do things differently from us. But I don't know, how else could you promote it?
What we do in terms of, and the trouble is it is restricted to those refusals to assess, but they are the majority of our mediations. That 0 to 6 week post follows through with the parents. So they make an initial phone call to say, we've received your request, this is what's going to happen over the next 6 weeks. And then we'll make a phone call after a decision to explain the decision and also offer a way forward meeting. So everybody that gets a refusal to assess decision is offered a way forward meeting with the local authority and with the school. And that gives the forum to discuss what can come next or what can't come next, or explain appeals, explain mediation.
Sorry, can I just say something there, actually, Katie? Yeah, the trouble is my kids' mediation meeting was this morning and the way forward meeting come in this afternoon, where they told me it was quicker to take it to tribunal my daughter's case, instead of going to mediation, just take it to tribunal. And now the way forward meetings come in, but it's too late because I've decided that's the route I'm going to take. So I think it's a little bit all over the place, you know. I think if these things are happening, there needs to be some order in what's going, you know, the local authority needs to be quick in acting to manage, but then that's the trouble, you know.
The difficulty probably for you, Tanya, is that our 0 to 6 week officer has been unwell. And unfortunately, we are a human service, and sometimes there's nothing we can do about it. In terms of
yeah.
Are you saying you had a delay in booking a meeting?
After the mediation services spoke to me about my decision whether I'm going to go to mediation or whether I'm taking it to tribunal. Well, because of the bad experience I had the first time, no one emphasised to me I could take support. I went into the meeting alone. Like I said, I felt back, you know, overwhelmed with all the people around me, and then agreed to this support that was meant to happen. And I think because the SENCO wasn't supportive of my son in the first place, and he refused to take his autism diagnosis, and he was forcing eye contact upon him and all the rest of it, I just felt I shouldn't have made that decision. I should have, you know, fought for my son. And then I felt a bit disheartened myself because I'd made, you know, just agreed with them to keep, you know, get out the meeting, to be honest. That's the truth of it. And another thing, what happened was the school got in contact with my family support worker at the time, and the family support worker rang me, and she was on the phone for over an hour convincing me to go to mediation and, you know, try and sort it out with the school. And I said yes, no problems. That's why I did the mediation. But I still didn't find my son weren't receiving any more support than was happening. You know, he's still behind. He's still struggling with the same things he's always been.
Is it the conversations that you had at mediation aren't
Yeah,
necessarily being
I don't
followed
think anything moved forward from that. Yeah, the mediator was great.
Is it the intention? Sorry.
Yeah,
Matt,
that's right. Yes, disheartening for me, 'cause then I know. Yeah.
Sorry,
and the
Tanya,
SEND support wasn't happening, even though they're saying, "Oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, give them extra this, extra." Just didn't happen, and you know. But it's hard, isn't it? So it's, yeah, you know, you want to work with the schools, but when the schools are not doing what, you know, you're supporting you in working with the children with special needs and denying the fact that they've got autism when it's diagnosed by health professionals, and you have to remind them that they're teachers, not paediatricians, it's tricky. Yeah. But thank God he's gone to another local authority or whatever now. So,
Anya, are you okay at the moment? Because we can take this, you know, offline for you, so we can see what else we can do to try and support you and help you. And maybe that's a conversation we can have directly with you and anybody else that needs to be involved. You know, yeah, that'd be to help you. You know, and then. Yeah, so we can have that conversation. We'll contact you. Katie, the only thing I was thinking while we were doing this is we can promote the process on our Family Voice website. We can put it on our parents page so people understand the process and how to access your service. We could even run some sort of signposting course and invite parents to attend and just make sure that the people are getting to you as quickly as possible, and you know, you're hearing those concerns as they come through.
I think that would be good. I think sharing information is always important. I think that, Marion, the difficulty is because there are different things that you can mediate on, it's very difficult to sort of understand uptake numbers, because the vast majority of people have got no need to use the service. But Marion, I think that we've actually got a really high uptake in terms of certainly those initial decisions around just sort of assessments. So I don't know if it's necessarily something that people are not aware of. Marion, what do you think?
Sorry,
yeah, sorry. Do you want to say something?
I was just going to say, I can't see anyone's face anymore. I don't know what my computer's doing, but maybe part of it's about, it's not necessarily the promotion, but just because you described the kind of process really clearly earlier, Katie, it's just going, right, it needs to be based on a decision. Then, you know, then that's the step at which you can move forward if you wish to do so. If you do want to do that, that's what it looks like. You know, if you contact the mediation provider, they will initially, you know, the initial conversation will be about, you know, as you say, information, advice and support, and going through your options and where, you know, what part the SEND partnership service plays within that. I think it's about understanding of the process rather than necessarily promoting it, you know, generally. Sorry, Marion.
No, I would agree. I think, you know, the information comes out when you have that ability to challenge. You have that right of challenge, but it's parents being made aware of processes that they could access should that happen, and who plays a part. Yeah, I think probably a simplified version of a process chart for them to know who else is around, and
almost like a flow diagram of some sort.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, Laura.
So what we're going to do is, obviously we've recorded this session and we will edit it and put that on YouTube. Katie, would you mind if we took your description that you gave so eloquently and sort of tried to hook that in and make that something that people could then go back to and refer to? Because I think obviously when you hear it, it feels like it's a bit more human, a bit more understandable, but I do love a flow diagram anyway. So do you all,
and there is some useful information on our present provider, which is Kids Mediation, on their actual website.
Yeah,
there's some really good information, and maybe part of your flow diagram, Laura, has a link to that website as well.
I think they've got a nice YouTube video as well, have they, Marion?
Yeah, I think they have. Yeah,
they have. I've watched it this morning.
Oh, you have, Laura?
Yeah, I know. I just had a little look myself.
Yeah, so it might be, that might be part of your flow diagram as well, Laura, to add those other bits in where they can keep replaying those YouTube, because sometimes it's about, you know, you get part of the way through and then you get interrupted because your children come in the room or something and you lose track. If you've got something, you just press play again and start again and watch it. It helps, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much. Was only booked in for an hour, is that right? And oh, sorry, Dorota. I can't hear you, Dorota.
Now, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so I just want to come back to the previous conversation about home educated children as well. Yeah, it was said that it is families' choice to home educated children, but actually the choice is most of the time because of the school disputes between schools and parents and disagreements between them. And it's not like that's a choice, and that children with special education needs, they don't have, they're losing access to many other services because of that decision. And it's actually a bit discriminative, and it's, in my opinion, that service with mediation service should be extended for us as well, because we still in the system. We are not, the children are not in school, but we're still using other systems, other services as well. And we have lots of disputes with different services as well. So that would be really, really helpful for us as well.
I think what's key to remember is that you've got the same access to the service as somebody who's got a child in a school. So at the same point, when somebody with a child in school would be given a right to mediate, so is educated family.
Yeah, there's no difference between us and school because the children are still in full education. So the home education is a legal education in the UK. So children are still educated. So we still should have access to mediation service.
You have
and
exactly
out from the whole system. It's just a school, and most of the time because of the disagreement between parents and school regarding special education needs.
Yeah, can I come in there, Dorita? Because actually the mediation service is only commissioned for the appeals against the local authority and their decisions. Mediation doesn't run with disagreements towards schools. There is a dispute resolution if you needed to go through that you can have with the school, but equally our service as the SEM partnership service provide advice and support to parents who home educate, as well as parents who've got children in settings, and can help you have conversations with schools. Okay, but the actual mediation service that we're talking about at the moment only has to be provided when it's a dispute between a decision the local authority have made and parents' right to challenge that decision. Okay, it's slightly different than I think what you're wanting. You're wanting to have that meeting with the school and sort something out with the school. That's our service can support you with that. And if we didn't get anywhere with that, you have other rights through dispute resolution. Okay, that's cool. I mean, Laura, if you haven't got our details, Laura, Tilly, I think you've got our contact details. You can pass those on to Dorita.
Yeah, I think obviously, I think the home learning and supporting the families who are home educating is an area that we do need to focus on to make sure that all the voices are heard. It's been a really useful session. I'm hoping that everybody has found it useful. And, you know, like I say, we will edit it and we will issue it. We'll speak to you, Tanya, separately. We'll catch up with you, Dorota. But has anybody else got anything they'd like to add?
I did see Jason had his hand up. Jason, I didn't know if you wanted to.
Yeah, I did, but now then answer the question.
Ah, right. Okay, wonderful. I just wanted to reiterate that we'll be putting a questionnaire out again over the next couple of weeks. If people want to either respond or send it round, and when we have everything today, it's been really, really useful, and it will, as I say, help us to kind of shape that specification. But we're happy to distribute a draft, so at a later point you can have a review and put any comments in that as well. We don't want the consultation just to be one.
Who do you send the emails to? Does it go to parents? You said the survey, or what you were just saying there? Questionnaire.
So we don't have any we don't have details of parent carers directly, so we would usually ask Louise very kindly to put it on your website and social media. We also put it on our local offers, Peterborough City Council social medias, and then it goes out via Send newsletters, Senko newsletters, Send forums. So it goes out in quite a few different ways as well. But I can send it to everyone here today as well. I'll send it as far and wide as it needs to go. I'm not fussy.
Zoe,
yeah.
As we've discussed before, we are in discussions with not just yourselves, but Pinpoint, to look at the comms in more generally. So when we have our next meeting with Tony, we'll talk about the wider comms, because there's got to be a way that we can disseminate this information a lot more effectively to a much wider range of groups. So we are definitely in discussion over that, and I'm happy to have a separate conversation with you about some of our comms if that helps.
That would be wonderful. Yeah, that's really helpful. I feel like it's coming up as a theme, isn't it, in lots of different meetings, and it's something that it feels like it doesn't need to be difficult to overcome, does it really?
No, because there's still quite a lot of families. There's still quite a lot of families that we're not hearing from a range of areas, and there's got to be something that we can do to encourage different families to also have a say, because you obviously hear from us, you hear from the same families. We've got connections. There's got to be a way we can work smarter to actually get this out further.
Totally agree. Thank you, Louise.
Brilliant. Okay, everybody happy? Thank you so much. Thank you, Zoe, Laura, Katie, everybody, Dorota, all of you. Thank you. We'll see you again soon. Thank you very much.
Good to see you, Katie.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.